All right, welcome to America This Week. I'm Matt Taibbi.
And I'm Walter Kern, live from Hollywood.
Live from Hollywood and still not feeling all that hot, it seems
Well,
like.
I was feeling pretty good. And then I got on a plane to Hollywood and I came here and had some dinner with some wonderful friends. Then I went to a Hollywood Christmas party, one that I'm
Ooh.
often invited to, but can't make usually. But dinner was over and the party hadn't started until 9 and it was only 10. So why don't I just hop in a cab and go to the Hollywood Christmas party? I know there will be gift bags. I know there will be more gift bags than any one person can actually carry. I'll have to curate my gift bag stuffing. That's how famed this party is for swag. I get down there, dude, and it's only 10:30, but people are already in the gift bag mode. They've barely partied. They barely did the host the favor of pretending to enjoy her hospitality before. And this is the kind of party where there's like Shake Shack burger and so on pulled into the driveway, like to the Midwestern in me. That's the biggest party on earth. Like they have their own Shake Shack van. They had not only that, they had hand rolled marijuana in all the different select formulas with barista type marijuana experts, 4 of them at one table, trying to get that joint they're going to roll for Hollywood celebrity.
The stocking stuffer joint.
Just perfectly. Dude, there was so much swag. There was so much makeup. There was so much free stuff. I just wanted underprivileged children, maybe with rabies, to come.
Like 28 Days Later style, just running
right.
full speed. Yeah,
exactly. You know, I mean, their whole zip codes of Los Angeles that could have the most awesome Christmas of history if they could just have gotten on that gift bag rotation at that one party. And to see people who have everything, like I've seen inside their homes, I know they have like bridges over fake streams in their homes, but they're like, give me that free skin cream. Give me that free skin.
Jesus.
Wow.
Free
it
skin
really
cream
is a disease. Yeah, exactly. Like you get your skin cream made to you by doctors in Switzerland and flown to you and so on. And you're grabbing ass at this fucking party, you know?
Did you get anything?
Well, I mean, of course, for myself, do I need skin cream? No, I have perfect Hungarian skin. But how can I come home from Hollywood to my wife, who's also sick back in Vegas, without the full panoply of dermatological goodies that they're giving away in Hollywood this year? So, you know, whether it will pass the inspection at the airport, I don't know. I'll have honey. They threw away $8,000 worth of scrim cream because they were in the wrong
package. You're being accused of rolling on E, by the way.
Rolling on E?
Yeah.
Wow. I wish.
Yeah.
Man, I wish.
No, but well done putting in the effort to make sure that you get the stuff.
Right.
If there are any Russian speakers in the audience, one of the things I appreciated about that language as opposed to ours is they have a special word for free shit handed out at functions. It's called halyava.
Before swag, they had that.
It's a little different from swag. It's a little bit broader of a concept. It's like anything that's free that you can wrangle for some stupid fucking reason.
Because basically for decades they had to live on that stuff.
Exactly. And the whole idea is you would like cross the Himalayas to get, like a free t-shirt. I remember seeing some Soviet immigrants who had just recently come to America, and there was a restaurant in Boston that used to give out a t-shirt if you could finish like a pile of pasta this big.
Right.
And this poor kid who was like, I don't know, he's probably 21 and skinny, and he almost killed himself trying to eat this thing because it was like wired into his brain. But
Have
yeah,
you
no, I
ever-
think.
Have you ever
Mhm.
noticed how skinny people win all the food eating contests? You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
No, I used to indulge in that, although I'm no longer skinny. So anyway, so Walter's not feeling great. We're probably going to clock out a little early today, folks, but we have some stuff we want to get to.
Matt, don't say that. Now we have to go twice as long. I told you about the Lou Gehrig obsession. You know, I should not have confided that I had a relapse, because now we have to go twice as long. Anyway, okay.
Well, let's start with a little bit of history that I didn't know, because it as background to a discussion about this is sort of the unfolding, blossoming craziness surrounding Venezuela and some other things. There was also some really funny media stuff that happened this week since we last spoke. But let's look at SOT5. This is from 2013. Our former Secretary of State making an announcement that I don't remember hearing.
In the early days of our republic, the United States made a choice about its relationship with Latin America. President James Monroe, who was also a former Secretary of State, declared that the United States would unilaterally, and as a matter of fact, act as the protector of the region. The doctrine that bears his name asserted our authority to step in and oppose the influence of European powers in Latin America. And throughout our nation's history, successive presidents have reinforced that doctrine and made a similar choice. Today, however, we have made a different choice.
Who's we?
The era of the Monroe Doctrine is over.
Listen,
Relationship, that's worth applauding. It's not a bad thing.
Why?
this is at the OAS.
The relationship that we seek and that we have worked hard to foster is not about a United States declaration about how and when it will intervene in the affairs of other American states. It's about all of our countries viewing one another as equals.
Well,
Okay.
shouldn't the other countries have had a say in this massive decision then? I mean, here he just comes out and announces ex cathedra on the part of we what the new doctrine for the whole damn hemisphere is going to be and what it exactly means for you. It commits all of you to this equality and regard and so on. And we did it by ourselves, as usual.
That's right,
Monroe
yeah.
Doctrine style.
You can applaud. You can applaud.
Yeah,
right.
We're giving up our power. Now applaud.
Yeah, exactly. That's like that. I love that old story about Jimmy Carter telling a joke in Japan, and the translator saying, "President Carter has told a funny story. Everyone must laugh." So yeah, that was like that. I have spoken. You may applaud.
Right.
So this is now coming back into play because the Monroe Doctrine is sort of back in business, apparently. Let's look at SOT 2. This is our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth.
But our borders shouldn't be the first line of defense for the American homeland. They should be the last line of defense. And that's why we're prioritizing our fight against cartels throughout the Western Hemisphere. You can just look at the news. Not all of the news. The days in which these narco-terrorists, designated terror organizations, operate freely in our hemisphere are over. These narco-terrorists are the Al-Qaeda of our hemisphere, and we are hunting them with the same sophistication and precision that we hunted Al-Qaeda. We are tracking them, we are killing them, and we will keep killing them so long as they are poisoning our people with narcotics so lethal that they're tantamount to chemical weapons. After years of neglect, the United States will restore U.S. military dominance in the Western Hemisphere. We will use it to protect our homeland and access to key terrain throughout the region. We will also deny adversaries' ability to position forces or other threatening capabilities in our hemisphere. Past administrations perpetuated the belief that the Monroe Doctrine had expired. They were wrong. The Monroe Doctrine is in effect, and it is stronger than ever under the Trump corollary.
In full effect.
Common sense restoration of our power and prerogatives in this hemisphere, consistent with U.S. interests.
Well, the Monroe Doctrine that we didn't know expired is back. That's what I learned today. It's no change on Monroe Doctrine, unless for that few years you were going on John Kerry's word. Hey, I just did what few journalists in America will even bother to do anytime this century, and looked up the Monroe Doctrine to find out what the hell it is. Well, basically, the Monroe Doctrine was just Monroe saying, you can't keep colonizing new countries in the New World. Okay, we'll oppose that. It was basically the colonial powers in the West need to keep their hands off and no more taking stuff. Well, what was the reaction to the Monroe Doctrine? It was largely ignored. Britain backed us because they didn't have many colonial holdings in the West. Spain said, "Go away. We practically own the place," and so, which was true. And so, in 1904, we had to have something called the Roosevelt Corollary, which was
the Roosevelt Corollary.
Yes. So it was articulated, the doctrine, first on December 2nd, 1823. It was so thoroughly ignored for so long that the doctrine was expanded by President Theodore Roosevelt in 1904, introducing the Roosevelt Corollary, which justified U.S. intervention in Latin America to maintain order. Now, I would submit that what most people think the original Monroe Doctrine does is justify U.S. intervention to maintain order. No, that's the Roosevelt Corollary. The Monroe Doctrine was sort of like hands off, and everybody ignored it. The Roosevelt Corollary is we're going to go in and do stuff in our interest. So,
yes. So collectively, though, isn't it just the thing from Animal House? Like, they can't do that to our pledges. Only we can do that to our pledges.
Exactly. But I'm anybody who wants to expound on this now is going to get from me. But what about the Roosevelt Corollary? And if they don't have an answer to that, or they act as though I've just made that up, then I'm not going to listen to them anymore. And so I hope we get a guest someday that I can shock with that. What's this?
This is Animal House. Let's just hear it. See if they... Oh no, it's 3 minutes long. Never mind.
Yeah, I didn't think it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay, the Monroe Doctrine is back. But
and the corollary.
And the corollary.
Right. Because we are going to intervene. I mean, that's what he's saying.
Yeah. And he also, look, this quote, we are tracking them and killing them, and we'll keep killing them. Look, this whole thing about the legality of killing people in these boats. They're not. I mean, he's doubling down on the idea that our intent is to kill these folks, and there's been more and more reporting, sort of suggesting that there was an order in that regard. So let's look at SOT-1. This was the story on from NBC on Sunday morning.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is facing mounting criticism over the airstrikes targeting alleged drug smugglers in the Caribbean. On Saturday, Hegseth would not commit to releasing the full video of a follow-up attack in September that some critics have suggested could be a war crime. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez is at the White House with more. Gabe, good morning.
Willie, good morning. While appearing at the Reagan National Defense Forum Saturday in California, Hegseth skirted questions about a public release of the video, saying the administration is reviewing the process to make sure sources and methods were secure. We should note the president himself posted the first part of that strike on social media back then, and just last week said he had no problem releasing video of the second strike. Hegseth is now vowing more airstrikes in the Caribbean, even as he faces growing pressure and is now the focus of congressional investigations. Admiral Frank Bradley, who ordered the follow-up strike, told lawmakers he was given a target list, adding Hegseth told him to destroy the vessel and kill all 11 people on board, and that he was in contact with military lawyers. That's according to 2 officials and 1 person familiar with the congressional briefings. Military aircraft overhead, the sources said, spotted the 2 survivors waving their arms before launching follow-up strikes more than 30 minutes later, killing them and sinking the boat. Bradley says the boat was traveling from Venezuela to Suriname, another country in South America, and was not headed to the U.S., according to an official and a person familiar with the briefing.
Okay. All right. First of all, the people familiar with the matter are back in full effect.
Right.
This is probably the biggest week they've had in a while.
all three of those people.
There have been so many different versions of that attribution that I've seen this week. I was actually thinking of making a collage out of it because with little variations on persons familiar with the matter, people familiar with the incident. And, there's an argument underway. You have different members of Congress who've seen the video saying different things. For instance, there's Jim Hines talking about how people were barely alive, much less engaging in the hostilities. When you watch the video, you realize they don't have a radio. They're barely hanging on. Then there's Tom Cotton, who went on Meet the Press, saying that there were survivors sitting or standing on top of a capsized boat before the second strike killed them. But I don't know, Walter. Is this whole thing a red herring to you? I mean, like it is. Okay,
I think.
So I think the issue of the
first of all, it happened a long time ago. Where were all these people then? What was the moment when suddenly this became of issue? I remember it. It came after the seditious 6 or whatever. They were being roundly criticized for not being specific about the illegal orders that they claim were going out and that people should be questioning. Somehow,
they're still being weird about it, by the way.
What's that?
They're still being weird about it. Mark Kelly is still being weird about it.
Right. Yeah, they somehow they didn't deliver. Phase 1 came off pretty well. Phase 1.5 was getting the networks to kind of augment it with stories of people who were uneasy about orders, billboards that had gone up. A few talking heads kind of came on and started dissenting to it, but everybody froze at a certain point. But it was necessary, it seemed, to come up with something that the military did that was untoward. And so a search went out. Of all the many things that at any one time a military can be said to have done criminally, shooting people from the air, which is basically how we wage war anymore, right? I mean, and doing it when people who appear to have survived become the victims is something we should pay attention to. Is not.
Yeah, if you're waving the white flag of surrender,
right.
you're wounded, you're jumping out of an airplane with a parachute, not
as described. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't, this is a weird one. Remember when the guy with the Tesla Cybertruck blew it up in front of Trump Tower in Vegas a few months ago? Well, some manifesto emerged. The question of its authenticity is still open, in which he accused the U.S. of committing war crimes in Afghanistan. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And it had to do with all kinds of really witting bombings of civilians that I think resulted in hundreds of deaths. Where is NBC News? Where was NBC News on that? Not anywhere, as I remember. but there's a utility right now for this particular incident to be really bad. It fits into the narrative that they already constructed around illegal orders. And so we're getting it nonstop. It's not that I love it or approve of it or think it's funny. It's just that it's an obvious placeholder for other things. It's serving a function. And in the history of our bombing people from the air, civilians and non, it's one of the smallest incidents I've ever heard. And we don't really know what happened. So when it all comes out in the wash, maybe it's being misrepresented. I don't know.
I mean, we have this weird quote from Mark Kelly, even just over the weekend, who was saying, you know, I'm not going to prejudge this. I want to see the video. I want to see an investigation, which to me seems like, I think blowing these boats up is just on its face, prima facie illegal. I couldn't find a lawyer. There was one lawyer I found in Cornell who thought it depended on what the actual report said, but I couldn't find any other lawyers who were experienced in this area to say anything other than this is totally illegal. This is law enforcement, and you can't shoot as a matter of first resort in law enforcement. You have to wait until you're actually under threat.
But I thought we'd legally tied this into a terrorism thing.
Well, we have a fig leaf, this AUMF, this designated foreign terrorist organization thing, which the president does have the authority to do unilaterally, and has been the justification for all kinds of other attacks in the past. You're absolutely right about that. A lot of which were more gruesome than this campaign, even, although, you know, this is starting to become serious in terms of the quantity of people. But even so, it's still a step beyond even the Obama strikes, in the sense that, you know, we have this concept of, if it's a law enforcement thing, we're supposed to wait until there's actually a threat before we use lethal force.
Right.
And the idea of designating criminals as terrorists, I couldn't find anybody who would buy that. I don't think it would fly. But in the kind of courts where they decide these things, which
are these drug smugglers? But
yeah.
Matt, are these drug smugglers or not? Okay, that's one of the things that I really, because if these are like hardcore drug smugglers with hundreds of pounds of fentanyl, etc., on their boats, and they're going out now knowing that they're going to be hunted from the air to complete their missions, that is one thing for me. Are these just boats that are going around that we're calling drug smuggler boats on kind of not just false pretexts, but maybe lazy pretexts? They fit some profile. We don't wait to get the news. We can see what's on them afterwards, I guess, when we go and find the debris. That's what I need to know, because if this really is organized, high-level smuggling of deadly fentanyl by people who know they're doing it, then that's different.
Yeah.
To me, that's not law. To me, that's not law enforcement. To me, that's not law enforcement. That would be like saying it's law enforcement if they're bringing a dirty bomb. I mean, you have a right to shoot that baby out of the water wherever it comes from. Now, just because these things, people actually decide to put it in their mouth, so then it's just drugs. Well, a lot of people don't make that decision. They think it's something else. A lot of the deaths from fentanyl come from people who are taking other things and, accidentally take fentanyl. It's made into all kinds of fake pills, et cetera, et cetera. I'm really pretty red-blooded on this, but I do need to know that that's what this is.
I think most of these boats, from what I understand, this is not going to end up being fentanyl on these boats. It's going to be cocaine. But the Office of Legal Counsel memo essentially the argument is that the cocaine goes to financing control of rackets in countries that do produce fentanyl and do ship it to the United States, and therefore that is a deadly threat. And it's a little bit different than how they phrased it publicly, but
And here's
whatever.
I have one more question. And this would require reporting, and maybe this reporting is out there and I just haven't read it. Are we going against some specific strongman, some capo, some colonel, some key person in some organization who we're sending a kind of gang war message to? Or is this just kind of a stochastic drug boat blowing up? In other words, it would seem to me, as a lover of gangster movies and a novelist, that we're sending a message to someone specific, and that this group is one of many groups. In other words, we know about the rival cartels in Mexico and something, but we know that these aren't monolithic organizations. So whose boats are they? What are we sending the message? Is there any sense that they've gotten it? And what's this really all about? It seems underreported in many ways to me. Are these Maduro's personal fleet of, custom deliveries? Is this some colonel in his army that is, especially powerful? Or is this some group that we expect isn't even Venezuelan, but some kind of a hybrid cartel in South America that we're trying to take the fight to? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't know. That we don't know exactly, and that's what's interesting, right? So
And here's Suriname coming into it, which suggests now that it's a not specifically national enterprise that we're going against.
right. Although, well, let's listen to something that's interesting, because although I think my personal feeling on the Hegseth thing is that this has been a disaster and that it doesn't look great. There was a part of he gave a speech over the weekend that was interesting. And let's listen to this. This is SOT 4.
Ronald Reagan taught us the value of focused, powerful leadership, but his so-called disciples didn't heed that lesson. Since the end of the Cold War, a generation of self-proclaimed neo-Reaganites have touted Reagan's name, but didn't govern like him. All the bluster, none of the clarity. That's especially true in the military realm. This generation of self-proclaimed neo-Reaganites abandoned Reagan's actual wise policies in favor of unchecked neoconservatism and economic globalism. In economics, they dismantled our industrial base, shipping it overseas. At the same time, in diplomacy and defense, they swore off the clear-eyed, flexible realism of Reagan, Nixon, and Eisenhower. Instead, they set about trying to make America the policeman, the protector, the arbiter of the whole world. Democracy for all, they say, even in the Pesh River Valley. Even when people don't want it, can't do it. They turned American allies into dependents, all but encouraging these nations across Europe and around the world to free ride while we subsidize their defense with U.S. taxpayer dollars. These self-described neo-Reaganites sought global military hegemony under the auspices of peace through strength. Instead, we got rudderless wars in the Middle East, land war in Europe, and the economic rise of China. After presiding over such a poor performance, it's remarkable that these people still think they're qualified to speak in public, let alone moralize to the rest of us. Some of them have even been awarded for it on this very stage.
Okay.
All right. So that was interesting. So that last bit, and thanks to our mystery producer for catching this, that was a reference to Lloyd Austin, who won the forum's Peace Through Strength award.
Mhm.
And no, that is a very interesting argument that he was making there. Now, I'm not sure how much
How do you understand the argument, just to put it simply?
well, his criticism, essentially, he's claiming that the Reagan foreign policy was peace through strength, confront enemies, clearly define what your mission is. Don't go around making wars all over the world, and make sure that you keep your industrial base strong. Although I would disagree that that's what Reagan did. We certainly saw a lot of export of jobs during that time period. But I heard that exact argument come from a Russian general named Alexander Lebed during the presidential election in 1996. I was in the front row of a speech that he gave, saying those exact things, that a country's, a powerful country cannot afford to export its industrial base. When we can't be a mighty country if we're importing butter from Australia, and we can't go around draining the national treasure in costly entanglements, in these in regional hellholes. I don't know. I thought that was a more clearly defined thing that he was saying. But how do you square that with? He's talking about ending regime change wars, as reportedly the Trump administration is trying to negotiate Maduro out of office, and they're massing troop. They got 15,000 troops in Puerto Rico now, or whatever it is. I don't know. What do you think about that, Walter?
I think comparing what the Trump administration is doing to what was done in the past is apples to oranges. Number one, regime change wars. Which ones have we engaged in under Trump?
None yet. Although we
none yet, but we might.
We might. And
will it be a war?
The drone operations, didn't exactly decelerate under him. But anyway, go ahead.
But will it be a war? We don't know that yet.
We know that
there's a regime change negotiation, it sounds like, backed by warlike moves by our Navy and so on. Will it come to war? My prediction? No. Why? Because they already lost. They already lost because they've been shown over and over they don't control their own airspace, which is one of the reasons that I think I don't know how far out these boats are going, how far they're out from Venezuela, but I think it's been more than anything a daily demonstration of their impotence, and probably meant to demonstrate that. And it's probably a training exercise largely. In the name of doing this, they're getting all kinds of electronic stuff into position, all kinds of vessels. They're getting intelligence about where things come from. They're hearing chatter. It sounds like practice, this drug boat stuff, for the containment of Venezuela electronically and militarily. I have a sense that this is not going to be like, let's invade Iraq and see what happens.
Right.
Let's invade Afghanistan and see if thousands of years of tribal people will somehow respond to our new methods.
Yeah, let's see if marching down the Khyber Pass works this time, exactly. and doesn't end in heads on sticks like it did all the other times.
There is absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, and South American scholars, you have every right, and historians, to make total fun of me on this, but it has yet to be shown that the Venezuelan regime is even capable of standing up to, if Suriname, basically. I know they've got lots of people. I know they've got lots of, I'm sure, material and so on. But their ability to cope with a modern war in which in the first 15 minutes, you don't have electronics anymore, and then in the next 15 minutes, you don't have an internet, and etc. It might be incredibly successful regime change war should it come to that. But I don't think it's going to be, because I don't think their confidence that they can sustain whatever Trump is probably threatening them with is very high at all. That's just my read of things. Because we've not yet, if it was the Middle East where we'd seen the army fight many times and stand up to different situations and, prove itself in difficulties, that would be one thing. But I don't even know what the Venezuelan armed forces are, frankly, except some descriptions. And their capabilities, I'm sure technically are great, but let's see how you're doing with a war against the United frickin' States, rather than taking billions of dollars and going to wherever. I guess I just don't feel like we're on the road to that big long-term quagmire that the Democrats would love, the Republicans fear, and would seem to be hypocritical if it were something that was actually going to happen.
Yeah, I think what Hegseth was saying, which is interesting, is that the previous time period saw a policy of starting wars all over the place, essentially for the sake of doing it, to create client states that are utterly dependent upon us, that are corrupt, that we are then tied to forever, and creates this never-ending cycle of stupidity. I wanted to keep this comment up here by @DanSnyder5025 because this is funny. Those boats are carrying yellow cake, said Dick Cheney, because that's a good comparison. Think about how many people we shock and awe to death over something significantly stupider even than this drug thing that I totally disagree with, but I even more disagreed with the Iraq situation, because the country had nothing to do with the stated, with the alleged reason that we were going in there. And we killed enormous numbers of people. We created all kinds of enemies in that part of the world. We destabilized the whole thing. And
except there's one problem, Matt. The drug war is real. Okay. Saddam Hussein's massive weapons of mass destruction weren't.
That's what I'm saying. But
I go outside, as I say millions of times every time I'm on this podcast, and I see the wages of the drug war in people dying on the street, in the fact that I can't get a razor from Walgreens without it being locked up, in terms of endless rehabs and social services offices, all of which are meant to deal with the consequences, social and other health-wise, of drug use and so on. Like, the drug war is real. That wasn't. So, it's a funny comparison, but there's got to be drugs on some boats because they're getting here. But that was all just made up bullshit.
No, that was complete horseshit. Yeah. And people, we see these gigantic panels of upset, frowning people, and those were mostly absent over the even stupider thing that we did before. For me personally, here's somebody at Pablo Acqui asking, so are there drugs or not on those boats, Matt? I'm sorry, I'm just not at a place where I can for me personally, I can't justify blowing up people doing drug smuggling. I don't see why we can't just seize the boats but I do agree that this is a less fictional issue than the ones we got into before. And
you know what cartels do, Matt? They go into towns and they cut off everybody's head just to show them that there's a new boy in town. They take 100 women and they lock them up at a party and they rape them. cartel rules, if we're dealing with real cartels who are really trying to get these drugs into America, and these are their boats, and they want to play by what, international law, I will turn my back in case international law is accidentally violated while I'm taking a piss. If we're really fighting these people, and if these are their actual minions, and this is the war, then have it be warlike. And let's hear the blood and guts of it. How much did they stop? What was on the boat? What were the names of the people on the boat? Who do they work for? Who runs this cartel? I want more information. The thing that makes me really dubious about this whole thing is how little I know about what's going on, so that approve of it or not approve of it, I don't feel like I have the information. If I can presume that they're being honest, which I can't, and if I can presume that these are the boats and that these are the drugs and that these are the criminals responsible for what I see as a heinous and destructive social problem, then I might be willing to go along, and heartily, because cartel rules, shoot, man, cartel rules are we come down and take your head and we, drag it from a line on a helicopter and drop it on your parents' house. We're
I never liked that fucking guy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. If Trump's trying to get the attention of some of the worst people in the world, hell, he can do a lot more than take out, 2 extras who didn't make it on the first machine gun blast. But is it real or not? That's what I need to know.
Yeah, and in that regard, there's a small thing that I want to bring up that's popped up as a subplot in all of this, which is that I'm seeing a little bit of the comeback of the local newspaper or the regional newspaper. The Miami Herald has been out in front of a lot of these stories, with a lot of the details about, for instance, the negotiations between the Trump administration and the Maduro government. They're reporting, for instance, that there was an offer. This is, today's the first day of winter meetings for baseball. It's like the sports writer who knows who offered what for what player. Apparently Trump was not willing to leave Venezuela unless he and his family members had full legal amnesty. He wanted full removal of all sanctions. He wanted the end of a flagship case of the internet before the International Criminal Court. And so all this stuff is going on at the moment.
This sounds pretty far along to me, actually.
It does.
Because listen to me, I'm a bunch of generals, I'm a bunch of colonels in the Venezuelan army. I find out that my president is already negotiating to leave. How many of my dudes am I willing to have die when a warthog comes in with its shredding spray that turns people to mist? Like, because they haven't finished their negotiations, I'm going to let my, unit be eaten by a warthog? No, this isn't going to be a war. Somebody's not going to say, Maduro gave his best offer and now it's time for thousands to die because, no.
Yeah. If they're having discussions of that type, that to me means that the end is already basically predetermined. I mean, if you're willing to even discuss any of this stuff, you've already contemplated
my big question is central casting. What variety of South American strongman is going to replace Maduro? You know what I mean? He's the strong, square, mustachioed, cigar smoking type. But are we going to get like a little Ortega guy? A man of the people, scrappy dude who came from the indigenous side? Or are we going to get a lordly, how can I put South American sort of statesman with a little bit of Castilian aristocratic vibes? We've already picked out like 4 guys, or maybe a woman, who knows, to succeed this person. I am not sure that this might be our most successful military venture ever, because it could end tomorrow with just watching a helicopter take off from Venezuela.
I mean, it could happen. There is a possibility that could happen. There's been a lot of reporting about what this is really about, and that's interesting as well. We're not hearing as much about that here in the States, but the Maduro folks, there's been a lot of talk that this is really about oil. That's what's coming out of the Venezuela side. Some folks asked, one of our listeners mentioned that it has the largest oil reserves in the world, and it does. We made some calls on that last week, and it's bigger than Iraq. People thought that the Iraq war was about oil. There's more oil in Venezuela.
But that, Matt, that, though it makes you cynical when you first hear it, actually speaks to a possible and very significant U.S. interest in this matter. Wait, right down there is a country with a hostile dictator allied with Russia that has the largest oil reserves in the world, and the Chinese want a piece of it, and Russia wants a piece of it, and everybody wants a piece of it. And the money that comes from oil is the real concern, of course. They start selling that oil, they could finance whatever around the world, and they don't like us. The fact that there's oil actually makes it seem to me more like a grown-up, good old geopolitical conflict.
Yeah, that makes it more like the actual Monroe Doctrine, which
exactly.
The show. That's why I wanted to bring that up at the beginning. Is this going to end up being? There's lots of different stories that are coming out right now. There's reporting from people inside the Pentagon saying that this administration just itching to go to war with somebody, that there's no geopolitical goal in any of this.
These are just factions. These are the is there anything more faction ridden than U.S. foreign, diplomacy?
Of course, yeah.
Every State Department person in the world thinks that they should run the State Department and maybe the world. Every group of 4 people thinks that their analysis of history and regional economics, or whatever the issue may be, is really the most brilliant thing that's ever happened, and they should write a book, and they probably have written a book. I'm sure there's much disagreement. But the idea that there's no agenda, there's no goal, it's just Trump wanting to be itchy and have a war, that is nonsensical to me. This is a pretty risky one if he just wants to have a war. Number 2, it might not. If he wants to have a war, then why is he negotiating? Why is he looking for a way out? Shouldn't he be painting the guy into a corner and giving him no way out? And lastly, Trump is, as you say, facing as much of a revolt as on his libertarian right as he is from the left. I can't tell whether the left cares about war anymore. I mean, they're really into certain ones and they're not into others. They're into drone strikes by some presidents, but not by others. I mean, they don't have a very solid or coherent position on war and peace right now, that other party. They just don't. Is the Democratic Party an anti-war party now? That would be
well, no, the Democratic Party, no. The party, no.
Right.
As opposed to the left, I don't know. They've been a little strange. I mean, it's been until the Gaza thing kind of conspicuously absent from like the DSA /
Right.
Bernie platform didn't talk a whole lot about foreign policy, frankly. But yeah, you raise an interesting question, and there's another interesting question with all this, which is, okay, so the Pentagon and Hegseth, like, what's the difference between what they're doing and what happened before? To me, it seems a little bit like the thing that happened when right after 9/11, and there was there were immediate calls for torture, and for people saying, "What about the ticking time bomb scenario? What do we have to do?" There were these stories that came out in the Washington Post with unnamed people familiar with the matter from the FBI saying that we need enhanced authority to interrogate people, to get to the bottom of things. And nobody really wanted to come out and take the bull by the horns and say, how are we going to deal with this issue? And Alan Dershowitz came out publicly and said, we should legalize torture, and here's why. What he was essentially saying is, if we legalize it, we can create due process around it and prevent it from becoming this unchecked, unrestrained, illegal activity that is always in the shadows. And that's an interesting position, right? Like I was totally against it at the time. But looking back, they what they did is they essentially went ahead and tortured people anyway. They gave themselves permission through some highly dubious memos to do this stuff. And they did the same thing with the drone strikes, which were effectively murders of civilians in most cases, including the double tap strikes that you and I talked about. But they didn't come out proudly and say that this is what we're doing. We're killing them, right? They did it in another way. And I went back and I wanted to see how they dealt with it back then. So can we look at SOT 15? This is Barack Obama talking about kinetic strikes back in the day.
I think there's been in the past legitimate criticism that the architecture, the legal architecture around the use of drone strikes or other kinetic strikes wasn't as precise as it should have been, and there's no doubt that civilians were killed that shouldn't have been. I think that over the last several years, we have worked very hard to avoid and prevent those kinds of tragedies from taking place. In situations of war, we have to take responsibility when we're not acting appropriately, or where we've just made mistakes, even with the best of intentions. And that's what we're going to continue to try to do.
Okay. All right. We get it.
What was considered such a riveting, thoughtful vocal style in the old days now just like puts me right to sleep. Wow.
I know, but why show that? Because that's how they dealt with it. They kind of used this somnolent tone, apologetic. We're with the best of intentions. We're trying to minimize the civilian casualties, but they weren't careful at all. They blew the shit out of people all over the place.
Better legal architecture, though. Improve the legal architecture.
They improved the legal architecture. The ones that they wrote themselves. And these things never really went to court. I mean, they were always decided kind of behind closed doors, or the courts refused to hear, lawsuits from people who sued, from the families that were killed by drone warfare. But they dealt with it by just doing it and pretending that, they were really, really worried about the civilian casualties, and we're with the best of intentions. We're going to do better, blah blah blah, and it kind of went away. Like the few times that he had to answer questions about that, it went away. Now Hegseth, what they're doing is they're getting criticized for this stuff, and he's coming back with, we're tracking them and killing them, and we'll keep killing them. So what's better?
Well, what's better is what Hegseth's doing, because we're not blowing up villages, and we're not blowing up weddings, and we're not, getting mass. Have yet to see any corollary damage. In other words, boats. There's a cruise ship off this fishing boat, and it got blown up by accident, but we had to get the drug boat, in a weird way, killing people out in water, is a really efficient way of not having damage to other innocents. But I'm going to say this. We're comparing now to then. We're comparing one thing to another thing. The war on terror, this isn't the war on terror anymore, okay? They might use the word terror every once in a while. This is not the Great War on Terror. This is
they're using the same laws, so
they're using some of the laws. They always repurpose the laws, and they use some of the same rhetoric because whatever worked. But what's really going on here is not being examined. For some reason, the United States has Venezuela in particular, and maybe Colombia, and maybe to a lesser degree Mexico, in its crosshairs for some military objective which has yet to be stated. It doesn't look like regular regime change of the kind we do in other countries where we get our strongman in and get rid of theirs, or get rid of the leftist movement and put in some, more Western,
some Catholic educated,
exactly,
right? Like the Diem or whoever.
Exactly. We haven't,
their monster, our monster.
Right. Whatever this is that we're seeing now isn't something that we've seen a lot of. I haven't seen a lot of it. Like I say, it just doesn't resemble the Great War on Terror. It doesn't resemble the chess playing State Department, we need our guy in that position, etc. It looks like something that is a battle against I'm going to speak out of my sort of assumptions and my little knowledge and my guessing mind. There seems to be a group of people we call the cartels that are engaged in one of the greatest organized crime efforts in the history of mankind. It makes hundreds and hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. It involves drug trafficking, human trafficking to some extent. It also involved the smuggling of a lot of people maybe into the United States. We're not sure about that. The president contends that members of these gangs, members of military age people from these countries that somehow answer to the country in some fashion have come to the United States. It's some kind of Hydra, some kind of Bond villain, Spectra or something. It's not particularly national. It's not particularly of one crime. It comprises many. It has a corruption element that has already moved into our country in some fashion. And I think most people would agree that the drug war and the cartels have corrupted American politics, society, and finance already. What is it that we're going to do to this thing that's going to stop it, that's going to end it? Does it mean taking over a building, a city? Does it mean taking over an office, getting one president in, one president out? I don't know that the entity that we're at war with is even clear. They call it the cartels, or they call it Maduro, but are those the same thing? Or they call it, communism sometimes. They talk about the alliance between Cuba, Venezuela, the Soviet Union. Is it all about denying Chinese influence? Or do the Chinese have sort of bases and or inroads that are really, really troubling to us, that say conflict with Taiwan, they could somehow leverage to keep us tied up or whatever? I don't know. Nothing is being clearly and honestly and fully described such that I even know what kind of conflict I'm in. And therefore, I can't decide what sort of tactics are appropriate, what level of ruthlessness is appropriate, what risks and reward equations should be studied in this matter. It seems, though, to have something to do with more than just Maduro and more than just Venezuela. And maybe it's a proxy war against Chinese influence in the Western world. And maybe it's against this multinational cartel structure. Or maybe, and the very fringe people who say this, I don't think are all that fringe. These places have been bases for intelligence agencies and non-governmental power players to project power Yeah, they have a piece of the drug smuggling. They have a piece of the human trafficking. They have a piece of the corruption that goes on in these countries. Maybe there is something to this whole Smartmatic voting machines was, developed in Venezuela and its technology imported around the world to somehow influence
There are
elections.
certainly people in the administration who think that.
There certainly are, and I've heard it myself, and they say it's serious. And right before the election, we were told not to believe this scare video that came out about, Smartmatic machines maybe spelling the difference in the election. Well, later I found out that one of the reasons we were dissuaded from drawing a lot of attention to that was that they felt that it would demoralize the Trump voter. They'd go, well, they're going to steal it again. They've got the keys. They're in Serbia. They're in a locked vault somewhere. They just turn the damn thing and amp up whatever numbers they need in whatever districts they need them, and it's all over. But later, after he won the election, I was told that it wasn't that this stuff didn't exist. It's just that the story wasn't helpful at a time when you wanted to get out the vote.
Right. I think this is it's a fascinating story. The legality issue, the hand wringing over the September 2nd incident. I'm not sure how much more juice that's going to have if the Democrats aren't going to come out and also say that you can't just designate people terrorists and kill them, because they're not going there, right? They're only talking about that one incident involving the two guys. So I don't know. We'll see. But
whenever I see a defense, people get all like moralistic about war.
Well, especially ex-CIA people.
Yeah, I start to wonder what's really up. Oh, you mean they're killing your guy?
Right.
Your asset in Venezuela is under fire. That's what you're worried about. Because when everything gets all like law of war and, theological and down to little tiny cases, I'm really suspicious that you psychopaths didn't suddenly turn to Jesuit priests. Okay. Somehow your ox is being gored in a way that you're afraid to admit. And I have a feeling, and this is just a theory I'll throw out there, and we'll see if it's completely wrong, that Venezuela, though it doesn't look like a failed state, is some kind of a weird pass-through state. That there's all kinds of players have a piece of that Venezuela action. It involves smuggling routes. It involves banking. It involves, probably a lot of mercenary muscle. I bet they can turn out some good mercenary muscle on the Venezuelan armed forces, but I don't know if they can defend their country. And I really hope just to learn more and for more candor. And I frankly would like the administration to be more candid, because I think they're doing these for reasons they're not sharing with the rest of us fully. I think they're letting podcasters and influencers and certain journalists handle it, but they're not coming out and telling us what their real problem is. And I think it's that, where it's a mafia war, and there's a giant mafia that they believe is gone rogue and is maybe associated with other mafias, internal and external, and we're trying to take it out in a future kind of war that we haven't been prepared for and had properly described to us.
Yeah, they're just doing this in a different propagandistic way than we're used to. We're used to, a message that everybody in the media supports, but whatever. We'll see how it unfolds.
And they can't claim it's going to stop drugs, right? Because if drugs don't stop, and yet they've, changed Venezuela and had all of these other successes, and here the fentanyl's still rolling, whatever, then it will look like a real failure. Right. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why attaching this to drugs is risky for them, because they better have the goods, because if 6 months after their big thing happens, we've still got all the same problems here. People are gonna wonder, what the hell? Are you corrupt? Did you just change distributors, or what? Is this like? Also, I feel like Marco Rubio knows the names of like the people who are sending the boats out, and it's like calling their family and saying, Pablo, I told you, man, don't, like, this is somehow Scarface, this is Scarface. It's not the Cold War. It's not the Great War on Terror. It's something that the Miami paper probably has a much better idea about than the Washington Post.
Well, certainly the reporting's been different, so that's interesting. Right. We'll see how it all unfolds. But it's progressing, and a lot of different stuff coming out. A lot of different threads to follow. All right, a quick detour into some media stuff. There was some movement on. Well, there was an arrest. So let's start with the baseline report. Let's start with SOT7, NBC's report about the pipe bomb arrest.
The court today learned that he spent 4 hours giving information, answering questions, and based on our reporting, according to 3 sources who are familiar with this, he confessed to planting the bomb. We don't know specific motivations. Officials are not offering that. But as we get pieces of information, it may help to explain that. In part, we are told that he had accepted the political view of the time in 2020 that the 2020 election had been stolen. That's a view that President Trump has falsely pushed for a number of years. That, of course, was the big source of the January 6th riot at the Capitol. During that time period, there was frustration at both parties because of the election. Democrats who handled elections and Republicans who, in a place like Georgia, as an example, they had been election officials in the Republican Party, but did not accept the president's attempts to find extra votes in that state.
What is this all about?
We don't know the motivation, but that gives us a sense of what some of his views are.
Okay.
In other words, we're still hoping the guy's MAGA, even though we're pretty damn sure he isn't. And in fact, there's really no reason to believe that he is.
Yeah. So there's an arrest of this guy, Brian Cole. And immediately the scramble is to see who we can pin this on, who gets to say yeah, and do the TD dance.
Like Christopher Wray was protecting some mad MAGA bomber for years. Right.
Yeah. So there was some weird shit that came out about this in the early, and this is why I always caution people with what we call crashes, like hot media stories that are coming out, and there's stuff exploding all over the internet. Always beware of what comes out in the first day, because there's always going to be mistakes, and even from quote unquote reputable news sources. So here we'll give you some funny stuff from sort of each angle. Let's go with SOT10, and this is Jake Tapper, who got upset with me for not reaching out to him for comment a while back. And I did ask him for comment about this. Haven't heard it back from him yet. But he listened to how he describes Brian Cole.
The FBI finally announced that they had arrested a suspect accused of planting pipe bombs near the Republican and Democratic National Committee headquarters the night before the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack. Brian Cole Jr., a 30-year-old white man from the D.C. suburbs, is charged with transporting an explosive device in interstate commerce and with malicious destruction by means of explosion. CNN observed local and federal law enforcement outside his home in Woodbridge, Virginia this morning. Attorney General Pam Bondi gave very few details about the suspect this morning, but said this cold case has been solved.
All right. Matthew Foria, you are right. There is no such thing as a reputable news source anymore. I just gave it the Declaration of Independence reading.
Mhm.
We're reputable, but we're not exactly a news source. If you're talking about the people who do the primary reporting on something that just happened and have, the helicopters
And by the way, that's a hard job. But
yes, and it is a very hard job, and the trucks and the satellite masts. If you're one of the companies that has those resources, of those many companies which are reputable, well, not MSNBC or MSN now, not CNN. CNN was too much a part of all these scandals and Jake Tapper himself for too long for them to be reputable. Fox is Fox News. The funny thing about it being reputable is it never pretended to be on anything other than Fox News. But what's weird about Fox is you won't get them caught. You won't see them get caught in a lot of just like ridiculous, egregious, getting things wrong. Because they're Fox News and there's a lot of hostility toward them, they're pretty good about their facts as these things go. In a weird way, they have to be upright because they're imitating the old days when news was reliable. So they kind of got to be that way in reality to some degree. But are there any reputable news sources? No, because they just told you the guy's white. Nobody broke in and said he wasn't. Nobody cares.
yeah, there were the producer didn't yell in the
Right.
ear and say, "Hey, fuckface."
Exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, he did the right thing. Jake, maybe even not knowing the ethnicity of Palmer, just ad-libbed white, which is always safe in his business, right? I mean, it's safe when he's a black guy because it just happened and he got away with it. But it did make people think for a second that it was the usual suspects, and that's what Jake's all about, making you hate the usual suspects even more.
So yeah, and I think this is it's a really interesting media story because this is why the politicized moral clarity model of journalism. This is why I don't like it. Like the old ethos where
Right.
we were not supposed to really give a shit. Who did what or why. Like the job, as I said, the job is hard enough getting the stuff right. If it's important to you, who ends up being right, who ends up being wrong, who gets the blame, who doesn't get the blame, then you will subconsciously start looking for those facts. Now, you mentioned Fox. What got Fox in trouble with media critics in the 90s and especially during the early Bush years was that, they weren't so much criticized for blowing stories or printing outright falsehoods. What the criticism was that they only picked certain kinds of stories that appealed to their to their core demographic, and there's there's some legitimate criticism with that was thought by media ethicists to be a great sin until it wasn't. After Trump got elected and essentially the same model was now everywhere.
Right.
But this is what happens when you have a rooting interest in the news is you'll start finding white people who are black and vice versa. And, it happened in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, like unconsciously people made the victims a certain race when they weren't, right? So that wasn't, it's not a good way to operate, and it gets you into these places where you will continually report these stories that are dubious because they fit, your narrative perception.
But what tends to happen is that you get these boo-boos that are all on one side when a story is confusing in its applicability to pre-existing agendas. And this one is, wait a second, you're telling us this guy who has a bail bonds company for illegal immigrants, that's apparently what he does, as far as I can tell. A multi-state bail bonds company for illegal immigrants. he's a Trumper who believed that the election was stolen. And so he covered himself up, placed pipe bombs. I don't know why. Were they supposed to blow people up? Apparently they weren't very good ones. He didn't get any fame out of it because he didn't show his face. In other words, for the glory of what did he do this? And then the FBI, because it doesn't like convicting January 6 people very much, let him go for 4 years, even though they knew exactly who he was. Wait, they had every guy who owned a steakhouse with a American flag on the wall and had been to Washington between those hours. They had every one of those guys as a co-conspirator. But this guy who placed a pipe bomb, and they had his phone message or his phone metadata and so on, they just decided to let him skate. Shoot, they had guys in solitary who just breathed the wrong way on January 6th. But this guy, they let go. What? This is obviously a law enforcement story. Let's find out what it is. But it's not a January 6th story, because unless the guy was put up to it in a phony way, unless this was a fake incident that this guy was recruited for. But the idea that he's some political partisan who, wandered into the scene somehow doesn't make any sense. They're not going to recast him as MAGA. They're not going to be. I think the Republicans and the right is hoping that he's part of some January 6th conspiracy to make the whole thing look like it was a bigger deal than it was. And because he wasn't useful, they just wrote him out, because it didn't work.
Yeah, and look, it should be pointed out that the Blaze retracted a story about this. They had done a story based on gate analysis that blamed
so much
somebody
for
else.
Gate analysis.
Yeah, so much for gate analysis. I wasn't sure about that one. But there was another, sort of on the flip side, Dan Bongino, deputy director of the FBI, and I should point out that I did a story, I guess it was still last year technically, that was based a little bit on some of his prior reporting about the contents of the House Intelligence Committee report on Russiagate that was very slowly leaked out. We did a lot of that over the summer. Dan did a lot of stuff on that, and a lot of it turned out to be right. But he had a tough week this week. He announced the arrest, and then had a very unfortunate exchange with Sean Hannity. And let's watch that. I think this is number 12.
I don't know if you remember this. This is before you became the deputy FBI director. You put a post on X right after this happened, and you said there's a massive cover-up because the person that planted those pipe bombs, they don't want you to know who it is, because it's either a connected anti-Trump insider or an inside job. You said that, long before you were even thought of as deputy FBI director.
Yeah, that's why I said to you, this investigation's just begun. We are pretty comfortable. We have our guy. I think as legal process starts to surface and information and facts start to come out, the public's going to be very comfortable with the investigation that was conducted under Director Patel and his leadership. He's been great on this. But I don't want to, listen, I was paid in the past, Sean, for my opinions. That's clear. And one day I'll be back in that space. But that's not what I'm paid for now. I'm paid to be your deputy director. And we base investigations on facts. And, it was interesting. I was looking out in the crowd today at the presser, and I saw a couple of media figures who you and I both know who promoted the other scandal, the collusion hoax. And I thought to myself, the difference between us and them is, we evolve as information and new inputs come out. We can produce different outputs because that's what we believe in. We believe in facts.
Okay.
Investigations.
All right. I know what he's trying to say, but look, that's a very unfortunate way to put it. I was paid in the past for my opinions. Now I'm paid to be your deputy director, and we base investigations on facts. That doesn't speak too highly for the kind of social media influencer way of dealing with things.
I'm finding this whole thing confusing, and maybe because I have a cold. What he said in the past was they didn't catch him because they didn't want to catch him, right?
Well, he said it was that it was an inside job too.
Right. That
Yeah.
maybe it was an inside job.
Mm-hmm.
An inside job meaning law enforcement, intelligence, the Dems, right?
Yep.
Has that been ruled out?
Well, he's saying that's not what it is.
That's
No.
not what it is.
Yeah.
So, well,
Now, it should be pointed out that Kyle Seraphin, who was, he's a big figure on social media now, ex-FBI agent, has a considerable following.
Right.
He was actually assigned to conduct surveillance on the other person,
right,
or not the other person, the house next door to the other person.
right.
He's saying he doesn't buy this new arrest at all. He thinks it's total bullshit. I'll find the exact quote. But yeah, that's the difference. But look, the reason I bring this up is because we're in this moment where the influencer, the podcaster, and we're in the space too, right? Like, people say things and they become news over if they're repeated often enough. And I don't know. How do we think about that? Do we think he's inaccurate now, or do you think he was inaccurate before, or what?
Well, if he's inaccurate now, he's inaccurate in a way that's injurious to himself, and people rarely are inaccurate in that fashion. You know what I mean? If he's inaccurate now, he's making himself look bad. Because if this is a non-inside job, if this is just whatever it would be, I only even understand it as an inside job, like some inside. Because what was it if it wasn't just a guy putting useless bombs with timers that don't work in places where like people just walked by them all the time and they didn't blow up? And I mean, what was he supposedly doing? I don't quite get it. Was he a bomber or not?
Yeah, either way, no matter what, it's a massive indictment of the FBI for the last, for the period up until now. I just don't think it's possible that we have the ability to tell what kind of cigarettes a person is smoking from space, right? And we can't.
But Matt, real quickly, is it your impression that the bombs worked? That they could have worked?
Oh, no. My understanding is that they weren't real bombs, right? Is that true? Am I wrong about that?
Well, I've heard rumors that they were training bombs, but supposedly they got this guy buying the timers back in June. What?
Well, I mean, where have we heard that before?
What might be true, might not be true. In other words, I don't even understand the underlying event. Was it the placement of the bomb, the placement of a fake bomb, the placement of a bomb that a really dumb guy thinks is a bomb, but on inspection could never have gone off? Okay, what's the timing of the placement? When were they supposed to go off? Apparently they had 1 hour timers on them or something. Like, was it supposed to go off the next day, that night? Was it supposed to cause an evacuation when they were found? I have no idea what they're even talking about in terms of the event itself. So it's confusing to me. The problem with being Dan Bongino and Kash Patel is that through your own efforts, when you're Dan Bongino, Fox News commentator and radio broadcaster, is that you have created such a high expectation of corruption removal, of plot discovery, of conspirator roundups, that you can't service the class of people that you got most excited. And most of I don't even see from the left that much criticism of Patel and Bongino. For me, it's all from the right. Like, you guys are limited hangout artists who are covering up for the same people, and you have the truth, and you've got no excuse, and you're still covering up. We hate even more now.
Yeah, no, that's become a major factor in American politics. Is like with the Epstein story, with this story, with the Kirk assassination situation, with Candace Owens, who suddenly the world's most influential person. Really,
run, Candace, run.
Yeah. By the way, if anybody wants to enjoy an amusing 10 minutes, get a transcript of any of Candace's broadcasts and ask your favorite chatbot program to analyze it just ask for an analysis, see what happens. But anyway, so this is this has become a major thing with the reality with the Republican with the Trump administration, is that there's this huge fracturing, into different sort of, pockets and divisions as a result of the influencer world, where nobody trusts anybody. Yeah,
but a lot of it on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it because a lot of the influencer world is actually an instrument of all sorts of different kinds of power, international, national, and so on. It's very gratifying to me personally this week that it's looking like more and more people are onto Nick Fuentes as not an organic character. I mean, Elon called him a Fed flat out, come sue me. I'm not willing to say that, but I think we're going to start to learn that this influencer group, which let's proclaim absolute exemption from. I mean, we stand on top of,
we're an uninfluencing group.
Right. Those pygmies, those people who do it wrong. I mean, I don't, I don't say hello to them if they say hello to me. The influence ecosphere is turning out to have been a highly porous, easily leveraged, and useful tool for all kinds of people. Most influencers came out of nowhere. Their sources of income are really obscure and hard to follow. You know what I mean? They take money for all kinds of things that aren't, subscriptions. I see Matt endlessly trying to explain to people, like, the only income I get is you sending me a check
$6.
For $6. Like, that's it. But in the rest of the influencer world, Matt, the one that we don't deign to go to the parties of, they're getting like checks from like weird entities and NGOs and
cutouts for state media,
all of which are cutouts, and institutes for the this and the that and so on. And it's really hard to tell who they are. I don't trust them, and I'm putatively among them. I can't figure out how a lot of them get so rich.
We promise you we have no sponsors on this show. We have no...
Dude, we barely have listeners. How could we have sponsors? So but what I'm saying is that the 3 network, few newspapers, local affiliates model is obviously over. Whatever this influencer model is, where just people suddenly come up out of nowhere and tell you the Jews run everything, and 1 million people follow them, and will fight for their honor, and then we find out weirdly that their things aren't their operations aren't based here, and etc. Like, I would say that it's going to be exposed increasingly as a inauthentic realm in which a lot of international and political money has battled to drive various groups against each other, create wedge issues, accomplish international goals, and so on. But into that come and out of that come people like Dan Bongino, and it's a monster that must be fed. He's probably realizing now that he helped create it, and it might eat him.
Yeah, I mean, I think podcasts are a net positive for the world. There's been, people learn a lot of things. There are a lot of incredibly interesting interviews, but the problem is that it's taking place during this period where there's this, as one of our listeners put it, where the mainstream media is in hospice mode, and nobody knows where to go for the concrete, dependable information. It's gone, as that person pointed out. So that makes it harder, right? Because then all of a sudden these theories and the strong takes that we don't know what they're based on, they start to have more purchase in that environment, right? The other thing I wanted to get to quickly, I wanted to hear your thoughts about, and I do want to talk about Train Dreams a little bit too, but there were some dueling speech issues, both in the United States and in Europe in the last couple of days. There is a case involving an app called Ice Block, which is essentially an app that tells people, it's like a crowdsourcing app that tells people where they've seen ICE agents, and it's designed to help. I mean, you can think about what it's designed for, but one way that it can be used is if you are, not a legal resident and you see that there's an ICE agent in the area, you can go somewhere else, right? It's very similar to the crowdsourced speed trap apps that exist. They are legal. Courts have ruled that, so it's legal speech. Yet Pam Bondi apparently told this app that the DOJ demanded that Apple not allow sales of the app anymore. And so if you go looking for it, you won't find it. And this is kind of the same, I think, the same jawboning issue that we saw in the Twitter files in the other direction with, telling people not to print certain things about COVID or whatever it was. So that happened over here in the States. Meanwhile, the EU leveled a $140 million fine against Elon under the Digital Services Act, which is their sort of Death Star censorship law. And we've additionally seen kind of a heightening of these individual cases, like the one including our CJ Hopkins, who friend of the show, and there was a soccer player named Joey Barton who got sentenced for calling somebody what was it? I'll have to find the exact quote. It was the Fred and Rose West of football commentary. Got criminally sentenced for comparing people jokingly to serial killers. So I don't know what your thoughts are about this. I feel like the Trump administration is they had a firm lock on this issue when J.D. Vance gave his address in Munich and castigated Europe for its censorship laws, and just over the last year or so, through an accumulation of incidents, I don't know. I feel like they've lost the argument a little bit by venturing, by kind of doing the same dumb shit that the Biden administration did. They're not doing it systematically.
What's the same?
No, like telling Ice Block or telling Apple that it can't
that it can't have an app for locating law enforcement.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it is legal speech. Like, what do you want? Like, it's the same kind of thing. it's like the the thing where Parler got suppressed, right? It's a very similar kind of deal.
Did Apple cooperate?
Yeah, Apple cooperated in this instance, and we don't know the whole story, like with who told whom to do what with the Parler thing, but yeah, Apple certainly took action in that case, right? So, it's not a great look, right? I still don't think that they're building like an anti-speech bureaucracy in the States in the same way that they are in Europe. I mean, clearly they have this huge, gigantic organism in Europe to levy fines and put people in jail and do all kinds of shit. But I don't know. What do you think, Walter? I mean, are they doing a good job on the speech front?
Speech?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's my read of the state of play since the beginning of the administration. They started going along with this, criticizing Israel is anti-Semitism and and they got a little weak on that. Okay. And I think they were called out and they moderated somewhat. Okay. As far as later on, did they try to police the speech of people around other issues of interest to them other than the Israel Gaza stuff? Haven't seen much evidence of that. Have you?
No, I mean, there's a Jimmy Kimmel thing, but
Jimmy Kimmel was, to me, the brushback by the FCC of its licensee ABC as far as their happiness with how it was executing its agreement to operate in the public interest. It was a brushback that was treated, by Hollywood as, I don't know, the day the music died or something.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
That the FCC should even deign to remind them that they all sign agreements that make them gazillions of dollars and require them to act in the public interest, and maybe having their talk show host on the eve of a bloody televised assassination give out what he knew, frankly, to be misinformation about the nature of the shooter. Whether they should have said nothing or something, I don't know, but that wasn't a huge knock on them to me. Is asking people to stop using or creating an app that allows law enforcement to be targeted in their positions, maybe in ways that could end in violence. In other words, I'm sure that administration's saying, these people are going into communities or areas in which they're in danger. And
no, that is what they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And you showing and revealing their position to those who might harm them. Now, I think that's a pretty good point. It's probably something that I would push for if I was in charge of ICE. It's team spirit. It's not wanting to see your guys maybe hurt. Is it a speech issue?
Yeah, I think it is.
Technically, it is.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be absolutist and absolutely consistent about it, it is legal. But I think they had every right to ask. I didn't see any. Maybe we'll find out there was coercion. Maybe we'll find out that there were threats that Apple was.
Yeah, they used even the DOJ used the word demanded, so I thought that was pretty strong, right? Like,
right.
We didn't see that too much in the Twitter files. It was always a very strong suggestion, but at the same time, another friend of the show, Andrew Lowenthal, who has the site Libernet. Not a site, it's like a civil society organization. They follow this stuff. They just released this huge report about Germany and all the organizations over there, and how much money is spent and how there's this comprehensive strategy to insert the state and these sort of content massaging operations at every level of society, in education, in law enforcement, at the doctor's office, online. They will visit you at your home. You know, CJ had 3 armed cops show up at his house just last week again. And
over what?
Because
Comments that he supposedly made about COVID, and
it's actually it's an image.
Really?
Yeah. So the cover of his book has a mask on it, and he was comparing the health authorities to Nazis. So it's a white mask, and there's a faint white swastika on the mask, right?
Wasn't it about a swastika last time?
It's the same thing. They just redid the case. They're now charging him with being the owner and operator of sites that promoted that image.
So when you criticize Nazis, so infectious is their symbolism that even when used critically, it can be presumed to what? Be so appealing that it triggers Nazism? What?
Well, look, I think what they're doing is that if you make enough things illegal, you can selectively enforce these laws.
Of course, but I don't even understand. I don't even understand the reasoning in this particular case.
He's somebody who criticized the health authorities and
exactly.
Yeah, so they want to give him a hard time about it, and they can. You know,
right? And they're using this absolutely invented and completely incoherent legal argument in order to do it about, you know, whatever. The question is, do I feel that the Trump administration is on par or getting close to, or even in the same arena as the last one? No, I don't. And I would say if I did, because this is an existential and creative and intellectual bottom line for me. I won't sacrifice it to be popular with anyone, even if Donald Trump was my brother or J.D. Vance was my best friend. I think these are 2 different areas. The kind of things that Trump's doing are the kind of things that power has always done. You know what? We want our enemies to be quiet, or, you know, not have their apps, and we don't want people who disagree with our foreign policy to have, you know, have the platforms that they should. Roosevelt felt that way. Lincoln felt that way. Johnson, Nixon felt that way. Obama felt that way. He used to go on about, remember, Obama used to go around about Fox News like if he could personally eliminate it, he would.
Yeah, no, of course.
They all do that. The thing that I'm afraid of is the German thing that you're describing, and the EU thing, and the thing that has $100 million research institutes at half the freaking universities in the West. If Trump started opening up research institutes at universities about, you know, anti-populist rhetoric or something, I'd start getting scared. The thing that we sort of bonded over and spent years talking about and had endless examples of, and they could come from COVID, they could come from other areas of politics, they could come from any kind of, you know, subject of war and peace, was not just the state getting involved in messaging, but in a weird way, the creation of an info state that was literally about, and whose essence was controlling what we say and what we think. I don't feel I'm closer to that because of Trump. Frankly, I'm a little disappointed that we're not further from it, in that he's not tearing down constantly everything that they built that could resurrect itself and remake itself into that. That whole world is on pause. All the Nina Jankowiczes and so on, they shuffled off to their new institutes and their new jobs and their new billionaire patron and their new non-official cover. But I don't know that Trump has torn down the research labs and the technologically sponsored substrates that could cause this to rise again.
Yeah. At Connor Knapp asked, why can't both sides be wrong? They can
about
be.
What?
About speech. I just think it's a totally different thing. My impression of the Trump administration is that there are a lot of people who just either don't give a shit or don't really understand the First Amendment or care about it a whole lot in certain areas of the government, whereas there's
It's
this
the Republican version of it. And it
right,
doesn't
it's the
scare
Republican
me
yeah.
because it's not that effective like most
Yeah.
Republican things.
It's not
But-
as organized. You know,
Right,
what they
there's-
call the whole of society approach.
There's
Yeah.
no Republican Klaus. There's no Republican,
Ursula
EU,
von der Leyen.
Ursula
yeah.
von der Leyen. What I'm scared of is very simple on speech. The installation of a sort of mechanized state sponsored or sanctioned or adjacent regime of communication, which is so perfectly you're not even surveilling it anymore. All its capabilities for surveillance, correction, and manipulation are like built in, and it just runs things. It runs your mind, and it does it almost on standing orders without any like particular call that day from the White House. And that Borg and the construction of that Borg and the unleashing, the turning it on and letting it go are the things that I fear. I don't think Trump is coming up with his alternative version of it. And number two, I don't think that the people who have been so far critical in building it are all that happy with him. See, I'm happy every day that Nina Jankowicz doesn't go to work for Trump. Then I will go, whoa, in other words, I'm happy when the State Department is out of the business of, global engagement, senator stuff and that.
Yep.
But I feel like it's all waiting to be reborn or reactivated, and I'm my fear with Trump was that he didn't take it seriously enough to make sure it's stabbed in the heart 10 million times and then buried at sea under a full moon.
Yep. Well, can we move on and just do a few minutes on train dreams? Walter, I got to deal with something at home here for
Oh, yeah,
a second.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Be right
We
back.
all know how that is, Matt.
Yep.
I know.
Be right back.
Yeah.
You can talk.
I'm going to say to the audience, both sides can be wrong on speech. I expect both sides to be wrong about almost everything. They're usually wrong in some degree about war and peace, but the one that starts a nuclear war is the one I'm going to criticize most. They're usually wrong about all kinds of social policies, but the ones who start some enterprise that can't be turned back and that's going to affect all of us are the ones I'm going to criticize. So, yeah, they're both wrong. The question is whether Trump is building an edifice that will keep us permanently trapped in a Orwellian or Huxleyan nightmare. I don't think he is. I think the other side sees themselves as having gotten kind of close to that and it being a good thing, frankly. They developed this rhetoric of misinformation and disinformation in order to cause us to accept and even celebrate our entombment in this new system. And since I don't see Trump creating an ideology around mis and disinformation and that kind of thing, and the importance of trust and that, I don't fear that he's going to be the one that locks the cage on us.
I agree. Yeah.
But man, will he, come out, I'm sure, on a regular basis and tell people to shut up in unconstitutional ways just because he disagrees with them? Yeah. And that's what guys like us are for. That's what the press is for. That's what the courts are for. It's a challenge which none of them can meet, that I fear, when they suddenly go like, Sam Altman has developed Democracy Norms Incorporated, and now we're all a member of it. We've all got to share. And, welcome to China with Microsoft characteristics.
Yeah, that's what I really worry about is the organized whole of society thing. But and look, it's still in full bloom, despite some recent pieces suggesting otherwise. over there, and this is not about Elon. The Elon fine actually came in smaller than I expected it to be. So, but there are there's still, if you dig into the particulars of all the different crazy ass cases of people being arrested or raided in Europe, it's pretty nuts. So anyway, just about Train Dreams, Walter, I just wanted to say I had not read this book, and you know, I put a lot of stock as a reader of fiction in first chapters. And I thought this is brilliant. I think I mean, not to be a spoiler about it, but the opening chapter, and first of all, how did he write this? Like it's historical fiction essentially, right? And did he do this from memory? Did he do it by interviewing people? And you know, how did these characters come along? Because he wrote the book when?
The book's from the 2000 teens, I believe. Somehow I'm away from my copy. It's in the other room.
That's okay.
But I can answer these questions to some extent. Dennis Johnson, as I said, was a writer's writer. He was the favorite writer. Yeah. Okay. That's right. Earlier than I thought. And he lived in a place called Bonners Ferry, Idaho. Now, the Idaho Panhandle that all Nazi hunters know about, the place where all the supposed white supremacists live and they burn their crosses and have their parties, is pretty close to where Dennis Johnson lived. Way up on the Canadian border, in the forests, in the part of the country where it doesn't really matter if you're in America or Canada, and you don't always know. I live in Montana, and when I get up in that country, it's like there are times when I don't know which country I'm in. It is the primeval forest, and this book is set in starts in the
19. It starts in summer of 1917, and for Dave Marks, this is Train Dreams by Dennis Johnson.
That's right. In 1917, the Panhandle of Idaho, as he describes, was barely inhabited by mankind. You know, they were building the first bridges over streams, certainly the first railroad bridges. And in the chapter you're talking about, he's working on a crew building a railroad bridge across a canyon. And there's a Chinese worker on this project because for quite a lot longer than people realize, Chinese labor was used in the American West as, you know, virtual slavery.
Even in Cuba.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's a kind of hazing of this Chinese employee.
It's a little worse than that. They're trying to kill him.
They're trying to kill him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And our narrator watches, and we learn that he's a moral man, but he's not a moralist. He's just a guy working on a railroad bridge out in the middle of the Idaho wilderness who kind of thinks what's going on is a little bit wrong. That's even a little much. And
he does carry the guy's foot a little bit. One part of it, they try to throw this Chinese, well, they call him a Chinaman in the book. They try to throw him over into a gorge, and the guy he fights for his life and manages somehow to, like, you know, through some amazing acrobatic move to escape.
Right. You're right. So the narrator's partly implicated in the attack.
Yep. Yeah. He took part in the attempt on the life of a Chinese laborer.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's portrayed as a bunch of laborers, men by themselves. Maybe they drink a lot. Maybe they're alone a lot. And it's not exactly hijinks they're getting up to, but it's almost like soldiers who've sort of lost a sense of right and wrong or something. It's a world we haven't been in.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
It's a world of big industrial projects, mines, bridge building, logging, and so on. You're asking, how did Dennis Johnson understand and recreate so well this 1917 world? And I'll tell you why. Because when he lived in it in the 1990s, it wasn't that different.
Well, that's interesting.
Bonners Ferry, Idaho, and what they call the Yak, which is the extreme northwest piece of Montana. I have a friend, Rick Bass. Maybe you've heard of him. He's a writer, short story writer. Rick lived up in the Yak near Dennis, and he went in every once in a while to place a phone call at the bar, which had the only phone. And we're talking about the 90s. A lot of the people who live out in these places, they are still trappers. You can make a living trapping, setting traps for furry animals. You can make a living logging. You can make a living doing nothing, hiding in the woods in your shack and growing a little garden and keeping your head down. A lot of draft dodgers ended up in this part of the country. It's really not that changed. And he could have easily, Dennis could easily, when he lived there in the 80s, have met this guy. He could have met this guy.
Right.
Who would have been older, but would have been a guy who would have been 20 in 1917, would have been born in 1890.
Yeah, it would have been possible.
So you could have met a 90-year-old or an 80-year-old who lived this life. And that's the weird thing about the West. In New York, we know that, the Dutch settled it in the 1600s or whatever, but Northern Idaho, it's just getting started.
Right. And that's the appeal of this book. It signals to you in the first chapter that this is going to be an epic portrait of America, and in a way, it sets out the parameters of the discussions that we're having even to this moment about whether it was all worth it, right? In other words, it starts off with this sort of immoral act, right? It's a bunch of guys on the railroad who take a Chinese worker who's accused of stealing from the railroad company, and they're doing like vigilante justice on the guy, not even because they're ordered to, they're just doing it. They're trying to toss him over into a gorge. Also, they just don't like the way he talks and his gibberish and everything. And there's like a little it's a dark moment. Then we see the main character go home, and there's a very touching sort of graphically illuminated scene with his family and his very young baby, and then it ends by saying that he will remember this day the rest of his life. But then it starts off after that with these scenes of the same guys sort of exulting in pride as they find a way to save 11 miles in building the railroad. And you realize that this is the beginning story of America as a superpower, right? Yes. And there are these people from all over the world are in this crew, right? There are people from Nordic countries, whatever, like all these different nationalities. And then, but at the same time, there's this cruelty and meanness, but it's necessary, right? To get it done. Or is it, right? I don't know. I feel like that's how it's laid out in the beginning. I haven't gotten that far, but it feels very vivid, and it feels natural. It doesn't not like the way a lot of retrospectively written historical books feel.
It feels very natural. It feels as though Dennis, like I say, met people like this at some point in his life, or maybe they were older. In other words, he sounds like he's got primary sources almost, but he has a primary source in that he lived there. And like I say, that world has not changed that much. It hasn't developed economically that much. There's some people who vacation there who wouldn't have, but his slice of America, like you say, begins in 1917. you know, when you think about America from the point of view of East Coast settlement and government and Washington, D.C., and that, 1917 is well along in the American story. When you think about it in terms of the American West, it's really the beginning.
Exactly.
It's when a lot of people who never had left America, never left their town, first got involved in this World War I thing and, you know, went abroad. It's the first time a lot of people, because we didn't have transportation of that complicated a sort, ever got away. 1917 is the practical start of the American empire, especially in the West. And this book is like a ship in a bottle. It's a little piece of history that's actually not that far away in time, but starts very far away in spirit, as you say. These guys are exulting over saving the railroad company 11 miles in the design of their bridge. They are crew workers in a fashion that doesn't kind of exist anymore for a lot of people in the United States, at least. Back when we were opening the mines, like in Butte, Montana, you had people coming from Finland, Ireland, all the countries that were really giving us they're tired, they're poor. Well, those tired and poor ended up in a lot of mines, forests, and horrible industrial projects in the West, in which they often died, or building Hoover Dam, or those huge, you know, 1,000-person labor camp enterprises in the oil fields or whatever. That America is not properly understood, you know, and so not only does he choose an interesting time, he chooses an interesting place, because that life of working on labor gangs and saving your money and then maybe getting married if you have enough, and then maybe building a little house and, you know, riding out life, that's alien as heck to the moderns. But it existed.
It's very, to me, it feels like Steinbeck, like these
right.
These guys know that they're part of this awesome epic enterprise that and they're, you know, driving their way toward the coast, and they're letting out cheers as things get finished. Like, you can't even imagine people doing that now, right? Like, I don't know, when was the last time we thought like that? Maybe during the moon landing or something.
Have you ever been to Hoover Dam, Matt?
No, I've been Grand Coulee Dam, never the Hoover Dam.
Okay. When I finally get you to come to Las Vegas for the certified Walter Kern tour of Las Vegas, rated 17X, and showing you things that few who haven't been to the flesh pots of old Burma will ever see with their own two eyes. When you come and do that, I will take you to Hoover Dam, because Hoover Dam is the most American and un-American monument you can go to. You see pictures of thousands of people hanging from cables on sheer cliff sides with jackhammers, not just one, jackhammers strapped to their things with explosives in packs. And their job is to jam, dynamite into holes. They don't even have a city yet. They now call it Boulder City. It was just a labor camp of thousands of people. Dude, the Hoover Dam is almost as tall as the Empire State Building. They built a skyscraper inside a crack and held back, one of the biggest reservoirs on Earth. We did that. The country where people are afraid of saying bad words to each other or, having a microaggression came from countries who didn't even understand each other's language, parachuted in for the worst frickin' jobs in the world. And they built a dam and they were proud of it afterwards.
Even though they were brutally mistreated.
Right,
yeah. Same with the coal mines, all that stuff. Yeah, no, absolutely, right. But
I'm saying man's ability. The dam is it is a monument. It is an incredible American pyramid. Even every bathroom in the Hoover Dam with his Art Deco bronze bas relief sculptures is a thing to behold. But the pride of the individual in a common labor that results in some bigger, invention or production, a bridge, a railroad, etc., is something that we don't understand almost at an organic level anymore. What is it to cheer when your bridge, has its last span and so on? He brings to life a kind of consciousness and a kind of person that, though recent, is also very old. And he shows us during the book, the space of the book, the space of this guy's lifetime, how the world in which he's born passes entirely away into a new one, which is our world now.
So I'm very excited to see how he does that. It's beautifully set up. The brief description of the baby in the beginning is like, it's sort of a symbol of the story being in its infancy, right? And,
Right.
And you feel this sense of something beginning in a very small dot that's going to expand to grand dimensions, right? And sort of in the way that Downton Abbey mapped the British aristocracy as it declined. This is a different thing
Right.
from like the working class level. It's good. It's going to tell that story, and that is not often done. By the way, the epic told from the point of view of a character like this Robert Grenier.
But you approve of the prose. You're impressed by
yeah.
the language, the sentences, the paragraphs.
I am, yeah. No,
Yeah.
it reminds me of a couple of writers, but it's powerful and fluid and vivid and all that stuff. So
And oddly poetic at the same time. It's not pretentious.
Another thing that we don't often encounter now, right? So yeah, I'm all for it. Haven't gotten very far, but I'm excited for it, and I hope everybody goes out and grabs a copy, because I think we're going to have a lot to talk about. And I'm guessing it's going to end in some places that are very relevant to the present. So
It will.
yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks everybody for coming to hang out. Thanks, Walter. I know you're on your Lou Gehrig kick.
I only feel better now. You see, I'm like, we used to have draft horses on our farm, and sometimes they would like kick down the wall of the barn and drag stuff everywhere and go out in the middle of the driveway and go to the bathroom. And my dad would say, it's because we're not working them hard enough. There's nothing worse than a draft horse when it's not being worked hard enough. It'll pull your house down. It'll screw your wife. When I'm not being worked hard enough, just sit around complaining. But when you give me a purpose, I'm all better.
Absolutely. Well, we have a purpose.
Okay.
Thanks everybody. Take care, and sorry to be over time a little bit, and we'll see you later in the week.
See you then. Bye.